At my ex's sister's glamorous wedding, I was mocked as the lonely widow, and my 9-year-old daughter called a burden. Guests laughed until she took the mic and said, "I have proof the bride is hiding something huge." What she exposed next left the entire room gasping in disbelief. It's strange, really, how life can break you without ever making a sound. 4 years ago, I was married to the kindest man I had ever known, Ethan Dawson. We weren't rich, and we didn't live in some grand house on a hill. But we had love, laughter, and a sweet little girl named Zoe. That was enough for me. Ethan was a music teacher. He'd strum his guitar on the porch after dinner, and Zoe would dance around the yard like the world was hers. I used to sit there and think, this is it. This is the dream. But dreams don't last forever. It was a rainy night in Austin. Ethan had just finished a weekend gig at a local bar. I offered to pick him up, but he said no. Said he'd be fine. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. A truck ran a red light. They told me it was quick. Instant. I don't remember the rest of that night. Just the sound of Zoe's voice calling out for her daddy, and the feeling of my heart cracking open. I was 32, suddenly a widow with a 5-year-old to raise, and a mountain of grief to carry. People say grief comes in waves. For me, it came like a flood and stayed. But life doesn't stop when your world does. So I kept going. I returned to my job as a medical lab technician at a downtown clinic, checking samples, running tests, trying to smile when I had nothing left to give. We moved into a small rental not far from the clinic. Just 2 bedrooms, thin walls, and a noisy air conditioner, but it was ours. Zoe and I made it home. But Ethan's family, they never made it easy. His mother, Margot Grayson, a retired judge with a face carved out of ice, didn't think much of me even when Ethan was alive. She liked control, clean reputations, perfect images. And I was none of that to her. A working woman from a modest background, with no polished college degree or high society circle to boast. She never said it out loud, but her eyes did. I was a stain on their perfect picture. Vanessa, Ethan's younger sister, was worse in her own way. On the surface, she was charming, polished, rich. A tech consultant with a big salary, perfect teeth, and followers on every social platform. But underneath it all, she was calculating. Everything she did was about power and perception. And when Ethan died, her distance from Zoe and me only grew wider. Maybe she thought we were reminders of something broken. Maybe she never cared in the first place. Still, Zoe loved them. Or at least she wanted to. She missed her dad so much, and his family was all that connected her to that part of her life. She would ask about Grandma Margot and Aunt Vanessa, even when months passed without a call or a card. And I didn't have the heart to tell her what I really thought. Instead, I'd say, "People love differently, honey," and hope she'd stop asking. Time passed. I built routines. Woke up at 6:30, packed Zoe's lunch, walked her to school, went to work. I kept my head down and tried not to drown. Sometimes at night, I'd find myself staring at Ethan's picture on my dresser and whispering, "I'm trying. I promise I'm trying." Then one day, a white envelope showed up in our mailbox. Heavy paper, gold trim. Vanessa Grayson's wedding invitation. I stood there in the kitchen, holding it like it might burn through my hands. The venue, Skyview Estate, one of the most expensive places in the city. The guest list, I was sure, would be full of CEOs, influencers, politicians. The kind of people who glance past someone like me and never even notice. I had no intention of going. Why would I? They barely acknowledged us for years. The only reason that invitation even came was probably out of social pressure or guilt. Or maybe they needed the numbers to look good. I set the card down and forgot about it until Zoe saw it. She picked it up and read the names aloud, her eyes lighting up like a Christmas tree. "Aunt Vanessa's getting married?" she asked. "Can we go?" I hesitated. "Sweetheart, I don't think it's the kind of place we'd be comfortable in." "But we have to go," she said, almost pleading. "It's Daddy's family. That's the thing about kids. They believe in connection, in second chances. They believe in people even when they don't deserve it." So I said yes. I borrowed a dress from a coworker. Simple, navy blue, nothing flashy. I ironed it the night before and laid it across the bed. I wanted to look neat, respectful, invisible. I curled Zoe's hair that morning and tied a satin ribbon around her ponytail. She looked like a little star. When we arrived at Skyview, I could already feel my stomach tightening. The estate was unreal: glassy windows, marble floors, a fountain so big it had koi fish swimming in it. People in designer dresses floated across the lawn, laughter rising like music. A woman at the check-in table looked up at me with a painted smile and asked for our names. I told her, and she nodded, scanning the list. "Right this way," she said, handing us 2 elegant place cards. I took one glance and felt the blood drain from my face. Widowed technician. Technician's child. They didn't even bother with our names. My fingers gripped the card tighter. I felt Zoe's small hand slide into mine. I looked down, and she was staring at the words too, her brows slowly furrowing. "Mom, why does it say that?" I wanted to leave. Right then, right there. Turn around and never look back. But Zoe looked up at me with those wide, innocent eyes. She didn't say anything, but her hand didn't let go. So I smiled. "Just a mistake," I lied. "Let's go find our table." But in my heart, I knew it wasn't a mistake. It was a message. They wanted me to know exactly how they saw us. And I had no idea that this day, this perfect, golden wedding, was about to blow apart at the seams. We found our table at the far end of the hall, close to the kitchen doors, far from the main stage. I sat down, smoothing the wrinkles in my borrowed dress while trying to slow the pounding in my chest. Zoe stayed quiet beside me, twirling the ribbon in her hair. She didn't ask any more questions, but I knew she was thinking about those name cards. She always noticed more than she let on. The reception hall filled quickly. Glittering gowns, tailored tuxedos, champagne flutes clinking softly in perfectly manicured hands. No one looked our way. It was like we didn't exist, and that should have been a relief. But instead, it made me feel even smaller, like a shadow in someone else's world. And then she entered. Vanessa. She was stunning, of course. Her wedding dress was some kind of designer masterpiece, all silk and sparkle, hugging her figure just right. Cameras flashed. People gasped. She walked like she was floating. I hadn't seen her in years, but I knew that look on her face, like she had already won something, like she was about to win more. She barely glanced in my direction, didn't even blink at Zoe. I forced myself to smile for my daughter's sake. "Isn't she pretty?" I whispered. Zoe nodded slowly. "She looks like a queen." And I couldn't argue with that. Then came Margot, Vanessa's mother, Ethan's mother, cold as ever, dressed in an ash-gray gown with pearls lining her neck. She held herself like royalty, stiff, regal, untouchable. As she passed our table, she finally looked at me. "Oh, Riley," she said with that empty smile of hers. "You made it. And little Zoe, is it?" "Zoe," my daughter corrected gently. Margot's smile didn't move. "Right. How sweet of you both to come. Hope the seating wasn't too confusing. You know how these things get." "It was clear enough," I said, my voice flat. Without waiting for a reply, she glided off to mingle with other guests, her laughter like ice shattering against glass. Zoe looked up at me. "Was that Grandma?" I nodded. "She doesn't like us." My throat tightened, but I just stroked her hair. "It's okay, baby. Not everyone knows how to show love." Then came the dinner. Waiters danced around the room like clockwork, delivering plates I couldn't pronounce and champagne I wouldn't touch. I barely ate. My stomach was in knots. Zoe poked at her food but didn't say much. The noise in the room grew louder, the clinking, the laughter. I felt like I was sinking in it. Then someone tapped a glass with a spoon. Everyone went quiet. It was Margot. She stood, tall and elegant, holding a microphone with the kind of confidence that came from a lifetime of judgment and control. Her voice rang out, smooth and polished. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for being here to celebrate the wedding of my brilliant daughter, Vanessa, and her charming fiancé, Miles. Polite applause followed. Weddings, she continued, are a celebration of unity, of family, of knowing one's place in the world and lifting each other up. Her eyes flicked to me. And it's especially meaningful when all kinds of guests make the effort to attend, even those from simpler backgrounds. A few scattered chuckles rose from the crowd. And let's not forget the value of hard work. Some people may not be high-profile or well-educated, but they contribute in their own small ways, like in labs or kitchens. Louder laughter this time. I felt heat rush to my face. My palms were slick. I was frozen in my chair, too stunned to move, too proud to cry. Then I heard my daughter's chair scrape across the floor. Zoe stood. She walked calmly to the front, all 9 years of her, and waited until Margot lowered the microphone. The room went silent again. I was about to run up and stop her, but I couldn't move. "I want to say something," Zoe said. Margot looked down at her, blinking. "Oh, sweetie, this is a grown-up."
Zoe took the mic.
Her voice was clear. "Please stop laughing. My mom isn't your servant." A hush fell over the room. "She's the strongest person I know. She wakes up early, works hard, helps people who are sick, and still has time to help me with my homework. She doesn't wear fancy dresses, but she's brave. You don't get to make fun of her." I couldn't breathe. But Zoe wasn't finished. She pulled something from the pocket of her cardigan, an old handheld recorder. It was Ethan's. He used to use it to make music, but after he passed, Zoe kept it like a treasure. "I came here a few days ago," she said, turning to face the room, "to drop off a letter Mom forgot to send. No one saw me, but I heard something." She hit the play button. Vanessa's voice filled the room. "We'll label her the widowed tech. Maybe that'll remind her where she belongs."
Gasps.
Then Margot's voice. "Trust me. If she walks out humiliated, it'll be worth every penny of this wedding." Silence. Real silence. Not even a fork moved. I felt everything and nothing all at once. Then another voice played, male.
Firm.
Familiar. "I'm only marrying you because you promised no more secrets, Vanessa. You lied again, didn't you?" Zoe looked up. "That's Miles," she said softly. "And there's more." She played the final part. "If Miles ever finds out that the baby isn't his, we're ruined." The gasp this time was like a wave crashing through the hall. Vanessa shot up from her chair, face pale. "Turn that off. That's fake." Miles stood, face drained of all color. "Is it true?" he asked, his voice shaking. Vanessa tried to speak, but the words died in her throat. Miles didn't wait. He took off his ring, placed it on the table, and walked out, followed by his stunned parents. The guests were whispering now, murmurs growing louder, eyes darting everywhere. Margot looked stunned, frozen in place, her perfect image crumbling. And me? I just sat there, staring at my daughter, who stood in the middle of that room, holding her head high like a lion cub who had just roared. And for the first time in a long, long while, I felt the burn of power return to my chest. But the night wasn't over. Not yet. The moment Zoe stepped down from that stage, everything felt surreal. The chandeliers still sparkled. The orchestra still played softly in the background, as if trying to pretend nothing had happened. But the room had shifted, like everyone was holding their breath and didn't know what to do next. Eyes followed Zoe as she walked back to our table, calm and collected like she hadn't just set fire to the entire event. She sat beside me and whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom. I just couldn't let them hurt you anymore." I looked at her, this little girl who had just faced a room full of adults and spoken the truth without flinching, and I felt something inside me crack open. Not from pain this time, but from pride. I reached over and wrapped my arms around her. "You did nothing wrong," I whispered. "You were brave." Meanwhile, the rest of the hall had descended into whispers and chaos. Some guests stood and quietly made their way to the exits. Others sat frozen, their eyes wide, unsure whether to stay or go. Vanessa was still at the head table, standing like a statue. Her mouth opened once, maybe twice, but nothing came out. She looked pale, her carefully crafted image unraveling right in front of everyone. Margot finally seemed to come out of her trance. She turned to Vanessa, her voice a sharp hiss I could still hear from across the room. "You absolute fool," she said. "How could you let this happen?" Vanessa finally snapped, her voice breaking. "You told me to go through with it. You said he'd never find out. Don't you dare put this on me," Margot spat back. "You ruined everything." It was almost like the two of them had forgotten everyone else was still in the room. And then, like something out of a movie, Miles returned. Not for Vanessa, but for the microphone. His face was unreadable, his voice low but firm. "I just want to say one thing," he said. "To anyone still wondering if this is real, it is. Vanessa admitted the baby isn't mine. And I'm glad I found out now." Then he turned and looked directly at me. "And to Riley," he added, "I'm sorry. You were treated with nothing but disrespect, and I didn't do a damn thing about it when I saw it happening. That's on me." I nodded slightly, appreciating the gesture more than I thought I would. Then he turned and left again. That time, he didn't come back. Vanessa sat down slowly, looking like the weight of the world had crushed her into her seat. Her face was streaked with tears, but the sympathy that might have existed earlier had vanished. People saw the truth now. They weren't going to forget it. Margot tried to regain her composure. She stood again, tried to speak, to spin it, I guess. But no one was listening anymore. The woman who once commanded courtrooms couldn't even hold the attention of her guests now. Her voice shook. Her mask had fallen. And I realized something important in that moment. They had built their whole world on appearances. On lies, manipulation, status. They didn't care about family or truth or decency, not really. But in the end, all of it collapsed under something as simple as honesty. And it came from a 9-year-old girl with a recorder. I stood, taking Zoe's hand. "Let's go," I said quietly. "We don't belong here." People turned as we walked past them. Some avoided my eyes. Others gave small, respectful nods. One woman even reached out and touched my arm gently as we passed. "Good for you," she said under her breath. We stepped out into the cool Austin night, the sound of the chaos behind us growing fainter with every step. A taxi waited out front. I opened the door, and Zoe slid in. I took one last look at the glowing building behind us, then got in and closed the door. We didn't say anything during the ride. We didn't have to. That night, as I tucked Zoe into bed, she asked, "Are you mad at me?" I shook my head.
No, baby.
"You are braver than I've ever been." "I just didn't want you to get hurt again," she whispered. "I know," I said, brushing her hair away from her face. "And I won't. Not anymore." I meant it. The next morning, everything felt different. Lighter. When I arrived at the clinic, my supervisor, Dr. Patel, pulled me aside. "Heard you had quite the weekend," she said with a raised brow. I sighed. "Word travels fast, huh? Apparently half the guests at that wedding are regulars here," she said. "And they're all talking about you. How you handled yourself, how your daughter spoke. You've made an impression." I didn't know what to say. I just smiled awkwardly. Then she added, "We've been talking about creating a lead position for a while, someone to oversee new technicians and manage test operations. You'd be perfect. If you're interested." I blinked. "You're offering it to me?" "You've earned it." I nodded, barely able to hold back tears.
Yes.
"Yes, I'd love that." That same week, I enrolled in an online public health program. I had always wanted to do more, maybe open a nonprofit to teach low-income families about health, nutrition, and basic care. For the first time in years, it didn't feel impossible. Zoe changed too. She started walking a little taller. At school, she won a leadership award for courage. She even started writing a blog called Girls Who Speak Up. One evening, I found her curled up on the couch, typing away, a little frown of focus on her face. "What are you writing?" I asked. "A post about how sometimes grown-ups forget to do the right thing, so kids have to remind them." I laughed. "That's a good one. Is it okay?" "It's more than okay." Because it was the truth. And truth was the one thing no one could hide from anymore. A few weeks after the wedding, a cream-colored envelope arrived at our doorstep. I knew who it was from before I even opened it. Margot's handwriting was as sharp and tidy as the woman herself. Every letter like it had been measured with a ruler. I stood in the kitchen holding it for a long time. Zoe watched me from the table, her cereal forgotten. "You gonna open it?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. Eventually, when I finally did, it was exactly what I expected. A letter dressed up in polite wording and fragile pride. No excuses, but not quite full responsibility either. "I was wrong about you, Riley. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope, in time, you'll find it in your heart to understand my intentions were misguided." It was signed with her usual flourish. I folded it neatly, tucked it back into the envelope, and left it on the counter for a day or two before writing a response. It was short. "I can let the past go, but I won't forget it. Riley." I mailed it the next morning. There was no need for more. Some things don't deserve explanations. Vanessa never reached out. I heard she moved out of state, somewhere on the East Coast. I didn't know if she kept the baby or what happened to the career she guarded so fiercely. I didn't care to dig. Whatever became of her, I figured she was living with the consequences of her own games. People around town started treating me differently. Not in a flashy way. Just warmer. A neighbor offered to mow our lawn. A woman at the clinic I barely knew brought me coffee. A man at the grocery store nodded and said, "Good for you," like he already knew the whole story. Maybe he did. Word spreads faster than wildfire in this city. But what mattered most was how I felt inside. For years, I'd been walking on eggshells around Ethan's family, trying not to upset anyone, trying to be polite, invisible, safe. I'd accepted their cold glances, their judgment, their silence. I thought it was better to be quiet than to make waves. But now, after everything that happened, I realized silence hadn't protected me. It had only delayed the truth. Zoe was different too. She no longer asked why her dad's family didn't call. She no longer held on to their photos or checked the mailbox hoping for letters. She knew the truth now, and while that truth had hurt, it had also freed her. One afternoon she said, "I think Daddy would be proud of us." "I think so too," I told her. We started creating new traditions: Saturday walks through the park, Sunday pancakes with strawberries, nighttime talks curled up on the couch with popcorn and a blanket. Our life wasn't perfect, but it was ours.
Real.
Honest. My new role at the clinic came with more responsibility and better hours. I got to train younger technicians, lead a few projects, and even speak at a couple of community health events. I had a voice now, and I was using it. I didn't hide behind my work anymore. I led with it. One evening, I came home from class, yes, I was taking public health courses again, and found Zoe sitting at the kitchen table with a notebook full of ideas. "What's this?"
I asked.
"My blog," she said. "I'm planning a project. I want to start interviewing women around town who've done brave things." Brave things like what? Like starting their own business, leaving bad situations, telling the truth when it's hard. I smiled, amazed at how much of herself she was growing into. "Sounds like a powerful idea." "You could be my first interview," she said with a grin. I laughed. "I don't know if I count." She tilted her head. "You stood up to a whole room of rich people. You built everything again after Daddy died. You work all day, study at night, and still remember to put marshmallows in my hot chocolate. I think you count." I didn't argue. I just hugged her. Some nights I still lie awake and think of Ethan. I wonder what he'd say if he could see us now. I think he'd be proud. Not just of Zoe, but of me too. Because I finally stopped shrinking myself to make others feel bigger. I finally stood tall in my own skin with my daughter beside me, our little team, stronger than ever. People like Margot and Vanessa tried to bury us in shame. They used our pain like a weapon. But the truth has a way of coming out, whether you whisper it or scream it. And the thing about the truth is, it doesn't just free the people who tell it. It shakes the ones who tried to bury it. I'm not the same woman I was 4 years ago. I'm not even the same woman I was a month ago. Life broke me, yes. But it also gave me Zoe. It gave me purpose. And eventually it gave me a second chance. Now when I look in the mirror, I don't see the widow everyone tried to label me as. I see Riley Dawson, a mother, a fighter, a woman who walked through fire and didn't come out the same, but came out better. And this is just the beginning.